Welcome to the Comic Binge. I am your host, Paul Herman, and today we're going to be talking about X-Men 97 again, but not again, but yes again. Why not again? Because it's an incredible show. Let's be real. The show is ridiculously good. I can't believe it. I don't have the regular crew with me today like Chris and Javi, but I have an old friend now, I guess I could call him. Someone who's been on the show before. It's been a long time. I've been meaning to have him on for a while. I already promised him one. He probably forgot about it. But I'm gonna bring it up again before we jump him on. But without further ado, before I get him on, let's do the classic, all that crap, all the ways to please subscribe. Appreciate everyone already has. Like the video, comment, all that jazz, yada yada yada. So without further ado, I'll bring on my good buddy here. Sean, I can't ever pronounce your last name. I apologize. How do you say your last name?
Gavarna.
What you said.
Just picture another A in between the K and the V and you're good.
Okay, fair enough.
There you go.
Fair enough. All right, I have Sean coming back on the show. He's a He-Man expert, which maybe we'll have him on doing He-Man stuff soon with the whole movie news. That's kind of interesting. I don't get that in that rabbit hole. That's a whole different podcast.
That is a whole, yeah.
But you were on talking about the He-Man, and I remember we talked about, this isn't the episode obviously, but I said we talked about having you eventually on for Birthright. Remember that?
Yeah, that's right.
I have not forgot about that.
Cool.
And there's been talk about it, so, and I promise when I do, it'll be on earlier time. But no. I know. I just want you to know.
Paul has been feeling horrible because I was like, I know when the last time I was on, I thought it was earlier, and now it's like it's the guilt trip of the evening, and I'm sorry.
No, I deserve it. I should have known better. I should have. What's up, Rob Sketchcraft? Next week we got a big show. Next week we got the Mad Max episode. I'll just leave it there. It's gonna be. I have potentially 2 Mad Max episodes. Next week we're gonna be dissecting the script, which there's a reason why we're dissecting a script on a comic show. You'll find out. But there's another one which I don't want to give away yet because it's gonna be pretty rad. I'm gonna talk about it next week, but hey, that's a whole different podcast too.
Very cool.
So Sean's on. We're gonna eventually have you on for Birthright. Probably when it gets closer to the movie coming out, I think we'll have you on. We'll do that show. A lot of Superman experts. So but don't think I haven't forgotten, Sean. Don't think I haven't forgotten about that.
I now can say you have not forgotten. I'm very impressed that you remembered. That's awesome.
That's right. I have a decent memory when I wanted to. So today we're going to be talking about X-Men 97. I wanted to have Sean back on because it's been a while. You just kind of took a break from some of your podcasts. I felt kind of weird asking that because I kind of knew that a little bit already, but I was like, you know what? Sean's a good guy. I like Sean. I need to have him on. And so I asked you, let's have you on. Let's talk about something. You want to talk about X-Men? You wanted to talk about X-Men 97, right?
I was throwing ideas at the wall when you asked if I wanted to come back on because I'm like, yeah, I'd love to, but I want to make sure I have at least a history with whatever we're going to talk about versus just, hey, here's something new that I barely know. But and to be honest, what we're going to talk about is something, at least the comics that we're going to talk about, is a series that I wasn't following religiously as a kid, but I got these issues in particular that really affected me. And so it's like I don't know the beginnings of a lot of this stuff. I know this story, and that works. But X-Men 97 was one that, yeah, it's like it's out there now. It's really permeating my Facebook feed with the different stuff that's coming out about it, and there's a lot of people out there loving this show. So, and ironically, my co-host Matt from Legends of Grayskull, he and I have talked about it, and he's having some trouble getting into the show. So then I'm trying to work with him on, well, maybe this and maybe that, and he's just like, no, this isn't this or this isn't that. And it's interesting because he grew up with the cartoon. And he's one that's now like, it's not clicking for me the way that I wanted it to. And then I'm the one going, well, I didn't watch the cartoon as a kid, and it's clicking for me because of maybe the fact that I don't have that going into it. So
okay, I have to ask. I should have. I meant to ask Matt on here too, but I just he doesn't post as much on Facebook for some reason. I see your post more for some reason. Maybe the algorithm likes you more for whatever reason. I don't know. It's I don't know, but because I want to have him on it too.
Sure.
But what what exactly is not clicking for him? If I don't mind, if you have a way to explain that.
For him, and honestly, I can see it pretty easily from from I've watched all the episodes to date, and so for him, it's like there's stuff like the Madeline Pryor Goblin Queen transformation, and how they did a mini version of Inferno in the one episode. I think it's episode 3.
One episode did Inferno in one episode where it took
Yes.
comics like a whole year of like 40
Exactly.
issues.
And it was a multiple crossover. It wasn't just an X-Men, it was also in a whole bunch of other titles at that point.
We'll do that eventually, people.
He's like, he's asking me like, what the hell is a Goblin Queen? Why is she doing this? And I literally am like, I get completely what you're saying about this, because that is a left field thing. If you've read the comics, you're going to appreciate, wow, they went there. But then if you didn't read the comics and you just watched the cartoon, you're going to go, what? And like, why did she choose the name Madeline Pryor? Like at the end of the episode, I'm Madeline Pryor now. It's like, okay, you know, there's a lot of things in it where he feels like it's just happening, and there's no build up to it, and the recourse is not what you would expect it to be in things. And in some ways, I can definitely understand that.
I think, yeah.
It is one of those things where it's like it's taking bits of stuff that the comic fans would know and appreciate, and it's putting it out there. But at the same time, I do agree with them in some ways that it's like the build up to some of these things that are important, maybe the payoff isn't as impactful now because of the way it's being done. But it's also impressive they're doing the amount of stuff they're doing in only what is this now, the 8th episode that came out today, or the 7th now? I can't remember.
I think it's the 8th, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong.
I'll take it.
You know, thank you. The thing about this show, and I went on a huge deep dive with my buddy Sean Gerber on the first 4 episodes on MCU Fan Show, and this will not be that deep dive, people, unfortunately. I just don't have enough time in my life, and Sean does not want. He'll destroy me. He'll come over where he is on the East Coast and destroy me if I go too long. No, but like the thing is, I will give a little bit of that. There's a lot of compression of the show, but I gotta be honest. I think that the X-Men is built for that because of the medium that it's in. Is comics. Comics is compressed storytelling, and I think. I maybe I just go along with it a lot easier because of that, Sean. I don't know, like, and for those of you like Matt who are struggling with it a little bit more because it's not that show, or it's a show's. I mean, also the show had, I think, a longer life as far as seasons go. At least of the seasons, I want to say it's like a few more episodes, and you're also, to be honest, to be fair too, I think you're also doing a lot of setup in those first early seasons of everything. So it's you can kind of not grow with the characters, but you can kind of get to know the characters a little bit better. And I think now it's like, hey, these characters, we'll introduce some new ones, but we'll keep these stories going. And I gotta be honest, I think it's been really, I think it's been pretty, for what they've done. They definitely have got, like, put the gas pedal down a little bit on certain things. But I think the ongoing like narrative has been pretty good for the most part, and I like what they've done. So I think there's a lot to be said with that though too. Like I think a lot of people struggle with that Madeline Pryor Goblin Queen episode, but to me, that was more of a line of like, we need to get one, we want Cable, and we want to tell a story of like Nathan Summers. And you can't really make her Jean's kid either. It just wouldn't really work that way, because he has to have like a resentment to Jean a little bit and not have that connection. So he has like not really, you know what I mean? Like there has to be like a disconnect between Cable and Scott, and not just be like, you're my son from the future. It's more of like, hey, you're actually like not my mom, and my mom does not really exist really. So I have a little bit, there's not really a lot for me here. Does that make sense? I feel like if you had Jean there, you'd be like, oh, Mom, Dad, I'm here. I'm an X-Man now. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it has to be like something like not making him want to stay there because his mom's not there and his dad's just him and don't really have it. Yeah. Does that make sense? I feel like that.
Yeah.
I feel like that's
here's something. I'll admit this right now. So anybody who is a hardcore X-Men fan can just tell me that I suck, because that's fine. I didn't even know until probably like when they did that on the show that Madeline is his mother. For the love of God, I thought it was always Jean. I don't know
Well, they look
why.
alike. I mean, yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, obviously clone Jean, but there's this element of like, Cable is one of those characters that he works as a character that just like a foil to Deadpool for me. He's
Really.
that guy. Then I worry
Mm,
about him being in X Force and being that, that character
sure,
in certain
sure.
ways. I don't know what it is. He's never one that really broke it into my interests quite the same way. But what's interesting to me is when you go about it in the opposite way, because like, okay, throwing it out there, like one of my favorite characters is Superman, and so I want to read and watch the stories of Superman. But when it comes to Cable, it's interesting now because it's almost like him as an infant going through what he went through, and has to, the whole story with him going to the future and why. That actually is more interesting to me now as a father, because
Mm.
I never looked at it from that perspective until literally the last couple months.
Well, and if you don't have much knowledge of Cable already, I'm not saying you do or don't, but it sounds like you don't, Sean. So
Yeah.
like the thing is with Cable is he like it gets complicated way, and especially after I left, comic books in the late 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Cable got really crazy. And before we go any further, I have to comment, one of my best friends in the world, Justin Bulger, is a huge He-Man fan. He wanted to make sure he told you. He doesn't know.
Thank
Justin doesn't know. He doesn't know your background, Mr. He-Man. He's whatever. I'll just say that. So, anyway, I'm glad you're watching, brother. I miss you, man. So I want to say, like, I think Cable is always super intriguing to me as a character in the the show and the comics, and he got really crazy there. I think towards when I left, and when I came back, he got a little bit more put in reality. But
mm-hmm.
like you see here, Cable is, yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting, and I do think that I like the idea of Cable and everything, but yeah, he definitely is. He complicates things quite a bit, especially with But that's kind of what I love about comic books, right? I think the fact that you have this continuity that's ever growing,
Mm-hmm.
and you can't like you can what's the word, you can retcon and whatever, but like really, like in my experience, and again, I'm not a writer yet, and in comic books I say word yet, never know. But
Mm-hmm.
the thing is, the thing with comic books, and I think the best writers that are the ones who embrace the history, and the writers who try to erase the history, and in a way of retconning and try to get around things certain ways, instead of just embracing it and try to figure out how to make it work. Like those people have struggle and usually don't last long in whatever story they're on, for the most part. And there's exceptions always, but
Mm-hmm.
for the most part, they don't. I think the editors or companies that try to like retcon it, they usually always kind of have to like figure out a way to go back to the old way and make it work. And I feel that that's usually what happens with Cable. If the more you make it work the way he is that someone from the future, just a Mad Max future of mutants and Sentinels, and where he's from, and he's half cyborg, and you embrace that aspect of it. The more
Mm-hmm.
you embrace that, I think the more success you're going to have with him as a character. Because he's, as Rob Liefeld has said on his podcast, he's a macho guy. And if you listen to the Liefeld podcast, you know what I'm talking about. So we'll briefly talk about X-Men 97. It sounds like you're digging it. So give me your kind of general overview.
General overview. I don't push the skip button when it starts, for starters. I know there's a lot of people out there that don't, and then that theme song gets stuck with me the rest of the month. But what's interesting to me about the show is it's really putting characters that I typically wasn't as drawn to as a kid into the spotlight, and now I'm appreciating them in a whole new way. Like I know, like, again, going back to Superman, everybody calls him the big blue boy scout, but like Cyclops to me was like,
Oh yeah.
he was really hard for me as a kid to even get behind. Like, his power is kind of sweet and it's very useful, but then when you watch the first episode and they're all falling out of the Blackbird, and the next
Oh
thing you
dude.
know, that whole moment where he just uses his optic blast to let himself land.
That's an all-timer.
Badass.
That's an all-timer, right? That's an all-timer.
That was great. Yeah.
Really, before we go any further, I wanted to comment, Eric. I thought the same thing too, but according to Rob Liefeld, the creator of Cable, he said that was always the intention. That was always the grand plan, apparently. I don't know if I believe that, but I have to take his word for it. He's been pretty consistent, I would say, for a lot of things, and love him or hate him, that's who he is. But anyway, continue more about the what you're doing about the show.
I mean, the other thing about the show for me is it really is pulling me back into the stories. Like we said, they're not really going into the stories the way that you read them when they're written in the comics and all that. But when I'm watching this show, I'm like, my God, it's X-Men #4 again. You know, the basketball sequence, stuff like that. And you're getting little snippets here and there of stuff like we're going to talk about tonight in X Factor, and even like the Extinction Agenda kind of feeling some of this stuff. And I'm pretty impressed with, you're getting the flavor of the stuff that I really was drawn to about those comics in the 90s. And I feel like this is that time period of X-Men where it really mattered to me. It was literally, I was like chomping at the bit every month to get to the comic shop. I needed to get my fix of what the new Jim Lee, Will Spertasio, Rob Liefeld stuff was back in the 90s, because this for me is still my version of X-Men. No matter what.
Same here. Yeah.
It's like, you know, I know there's people that think Grant Morrison has a really good version of X-Men, but I'm like, I really love just the superhero adventure and the drama of it that this era had compared to, you know, like
Sean, really quick, I gotta ask something real quick. Okay.
Sure.
For those of you out there, please leave the like button, hit the like button, interact, all that crap. Before you go any further, I had to interrupt because you said about the superhero aspect, right?
Mm-hmm.
The line tonight. Do you know which line I'm about to say to you that you're gonna be like, you're gonna laugh? You brought Grant Morrison.
Okay.
What did Scott say to
Yeah.
He said, "What do you expect? Black leather?"
Leather.
My God.
Yep.
A double meta comment of of that plus the line from the. Oh my God. I was like,
yep. Yeah, and I loved it because it went twofold for me, because like when the first X-Men movie hit, I was actually I was dating this girl, and I said to her, I really want to see X-Men because it's blowing my mind they made a movie. Can we go? Are you cool with that? And she's like, sure, that sounds fun. So we go see it. And literally after we left the theater, I went and bought tickets to the next showing, and we went into the next theater over to watch it again, because I'm like, I can't believe there's this. But then when I'm watching it, I'm also going, I also can't believe they put them in leather. Why that? You know, like what? Why can't we get like blue and yellow Cyclops and all this stuff?
Like in First Class.
Exactly. I mean, and it did. They needed the Marvel era to really make people go, it's okay to let these guys feel what we like when we look at these things, you know.
And Morrison, I think Morrison has that. That's the one thing about I've actually before we were a YouTube channel, Sean. We were a podcast for like about a year, and the Reverend Chris Clow. I gotta get you guys together sometime. You guys would be super buds. He's a huge Morrison fan in general, but loves the X-Men run he did. He made me read the first initial run. I really liked it. You know, I liked it. You know, Morrison's a great writer. Let's be real.
Absolutely.
But I agree. I do feel like, but I also feel like he was kind of, because that came out during the movie, that he kind of was forced to go that route. I don't think he's naturally like, let's get rid of costumes. I think they had to make it look like the movie as much as possible, which I get. And by the way, really quick, the movie itself, I'm with you. It came out, it's a little tad younger than you, I think we're close in age. I was a senior and I graduated literally the year it came out from high school. So like, I remember I was out of comics, but it was really, I saw it opening night, or the Friday it opened, right? And I told my friends, I'm like, guys, I didn't drive yet. And I was like, guys, I need you guys to pick me up. We need to go see X-Men. We have to go see X-Men. It's a big deal for me. And I remember I watched it Friday, Saturday, and Sunday that weekend. I had to, because it fed this part of me that grew up on the 80s X-Men comic books like you and stuff. So I'm with you. So I keep it interrupting your
no, it's okay.
yeah. And then keep going. If you want to finish up whatever you want to do with 97, go ahead and finish it up, and we'll move on from there. But continue.
So I'm actually impressed that 97 is taking chances with what they're doing too, which I mean, if you want to jump boats here real quick, He-Man, they had Revelation and Revolution come out in the last couple of years, and they took some chances there. And to be honest, the chances they took with that one made me go, oh, like sometimes it's just you don't need to take some of those things and fuss them up. But the thing is that X-Men are tailor-made for this versus action figures that you would tell stories of in your own room or watch Filmation or whatever. It's
There's
like
not a strict canon. There's not a strict canon to go to with them, unfortunately.
Absolutely. And I mean that's the thing too. It's like there's so many iterations of what you can do with the X-Men. There's so many different like Morrison brought a different sensibility to the title than Chris Claremont brought to it, than Scott Lobdell brought to it. Then you can name whoever and go, yeah, they had this version that they brought to it and all that. And X-Men 97 to me is like it works on that level where you can tell some of these stories about the racism aspect of it and the polarizing parts of it, and it's still just as gripping as if you get the Genosha episode where all hell breaks loose. It just works. So and I think that show in particular is a really good case in point of going, hey, by the way, we have the rights to X-Men. We're going to do live action material soon, as Disney and Marvel, and I'm very curious to see what they do now that this is the way it is for people.
Yeah, sorry, my for whatever reason my AirPods just like went kaput. I'm not sure what happened. It was very weird. So I apologize. I'm gonna try to mix things up here while we talk.
No problem.
Yeah, this is very strange. I'm sorry, y'all. I'll have to do without a mic, or if there's feedback, let me know, people. Sorry. These aren't working. So yeah, I think the thing with the X-Men, what the nice thing about it, if you compare it to like specifically like a He-Man, what I think Star Wars has a little bit of this issue too, is that you can take chances, but because you have very loose canon out afterwards, it's hard to what's the word I'm looking for? It's hard to like really get a through narrative and take those chances, quote unquote. You know what I mean? So the thing is, when you're afraid of taking chances, whereas X-Men, you kind of already know like what's a chance taker and what's not, because you know what hits with an audience or not. Now, granted, like Goblin Queen's a great example, right? Goblin Queen is one of those things where it didn't register with a lot of people. I know some people were like, huh, but it made a lot of other fans like, oh, cool, they went this route. That's cool. But I think in the end, I hate to say this, but she was a plot device to get to again, like we said before, get to Cable. So they know what they have to do to get there to win at least a good portion of people over. You're not going to make everyone happy regardless of what you do, whether you have a canon to go off of like X Factor, X-Men, or whatever, or whether you have a loose canon with He-Man and Star Wars. It's you kind of already have a little idea what works in those Star Wars and He-Man areas, but really you have like a plethora of stuff with X-Men. You kind of already know this hits, this leads to this. We can combine certain things like this, and we'll, before we move on to our comics here, I'd be remiss to not bring this up. I'm not going to spoil what happened in today's episode, but I got to ask Sean, did you know about that story already? The main thing that happened at the end of the episode. Did you read that comic back in the day?
I was like, my toe was still in the water a little bit around that time, but that was also when I was like, okay, but yeah, when they went there, I'm like, oh, okay, they did it. Didn't expect it, because that's one of those things. If you're watching it with your kids, will they do that, and how are they going to do that to not have nightmares happen? And I thought the way they did it was well enough that they just kind of put it out there and they left it alone and they just let you think, oh, I know what's happening to the poor guy, you know, and that's it, and fade to black. So
Yeah, like it's one of those things where I just want to say really quickly that I was nervous, or
mhm,
I I didn't know if they were gonna go that route. I'm like, but when Xavier started doing his thing at the end
mhm,
with Magneto, and I was like, wait a minute. I'm like, wait a minute. And as soon as I realized, I'll just say this: as soon as Xavier and Magneto started duking it out the way they did at the end of the episode, I was like, oh no.
mhm,
And then when that happened, when that one thing happened to Magneto, I was like, oh, it's
mhm.
happening. And then it
Yeah,
happened. And I was like, oh, okay. Which is hilarious because they're all in 97 land. And but this is like they officially going off script of like past Jim Lee's era now. And
yep.
so I'm like, all right, well, they're doing this.
They're
So
doing it. They're doing it.
they're yeah, yeah, the Fatal Attraction storyline, it was yeah, just before we move on, I just want to say this for really quick because the Reverend Chris Clow, who's on the show here, Sean,
Mhm.
he's not a Scott Lobdell fan, and he has reasons because I think he
Sure.
did whatever. There's other there's a lot of like reasons that doesn't sound like the coolest dude in the world from what I understand, but
Mhm,
I whatever. I'm talking about strictly for the art aspect, the artistic aspect. I will say that Chris is younger than us. He didn't grow up in the X-Men era where after he took over for Claremont Lee and everything, and it was Andy Kubert and Scott Lobdell.
mhm,
Lobdell did a lot of stuff for X-Men that was pretty good.
mhm.
Helped bring in Generation X. A lot of cool storylines that brought in. Like he did some cool stuff with the series, and I think that when he was in it, he did some interesting things. So he's not I don't hate him as much as other people. Like Chris is just, he's terrible. Oh. I'm just like, you didn't grow up on X Men comics like we all did, dude. So that's why. So you wanted to comment about that at all before we move on?
He like at least the issues that I read of Lobdell, he was trying, at least from what I remember, he was trying to almost straddle the Chris Claremont had a vision for like 20 some years practically of doing of how he did the book and all the subplots and the inner
Yeah,
character
exactly.
relationships and
Nailed
things.
it. Hmm.
And he also would let them have time to breathe. He would let them
Hmm.
have, oh, they're going to play baseball and they're going to do that, go out in the field and they're going to do their thing. And it's the same thing when I think of what Lobdell did. At least there were issues where he was just like, yeah, let's let them play baseball for half the issue and do this and that, and then Storm and Wolverine can have a little conversation about what just happened in the last issue, and and like give them some breath, give them some time, and all this. And, I mean, he was the one that actually gave Angel back his wings, if I remember right. That wasn't that the Red Dawn story arc and all
So,
that.
yeah, he did a lot. I mean, he did a lot of different things, and
Yeah.
I think he gets a little bit of a bad rap now, or whatever. People kind of forget that he was pretty integral to that, to the I would say the Silver Age of X-Men. The Golden Age will always be the Claremont era, right? I mean,
Hmm.
that to me is I feel like the Jim Lee Claremont is probably the end of the Golden Age, and the Silver
Hmm.
Age starts when Jim Lee takes over with Claremont for like an issue or two, and then Jim Lee takes over for a little bit, and then Lobdell, Andy Kubert, and that stuff, and Joe Mad came on.
Yep.
If Rob, my boy Sketchcraft, he's big Joe Madeira fan. I love Joe Madeira.
I do too.
I mean, freaking what's his name? Morph is basically based off of Joe Mad's design, essentially, right?
Hmm. That's true.
So so it's that era is the Silver Age, I'd say. Then it gets a little weird after that. After
It
that,
gets dicey, and also my memory isn't really like, I remember parts here and there, but that was definitely like, okay, I don't remember what I think it was just I left comics. I do
Same.
these weird things where like I'll have like a 5 year or 10 year run of I have to have comics, and then I go for a few years of like I need a break because
Break. Yeah.
maybe like editorially it's not clicking for me with the stories, or maybe they're doing something that has something to do with something I wasn't a fan of from like cross
Right.
promotionally, like you said, putting them in the leather suits was probably addictive of, oh, let's do that because they're like that in the movies. And for me, I was
Which I
like,
get. Yeah, I get it.
the X-Men to me were always bold colored characters, and instead of
Right.
muting the black and all that. So but yeah, I remember bits and pieces. But my buddy Jesse, he's like, I think he has every issue from, I forget what number it is. It's from either the early 80s or even the 70s, all the way through the most recent stuff. And he
Oh, God
tried to
bless him.
explain it to me. He's like, let me tell you what I'm reading now. And he tried, and I looked
Mm.
at him and I'm like, I don't like anything you just told
Bro, Krakoa, the
the
Krakoa
Krakoa
era
stuff. Yeah.
is probably one of the worst ideas ever.
Yeah.
Because I thought Hickman, Jonathan Hickman, who's a good writer, great writer. I thought he was gonna fix the X-Men because they were a mess before he took them over, and he just
Hmm.
made it worse.
Hmm.
And then, especially when he like leaves, and then like they have these other writers, I'm like, what is going on? That's a whole different podcast. But the good news is, it looks like, I gotta tell you, talk about X Factor. Have you seen the new lineup for X Factor? They just announced a new book.
I did not actually, so
Okay, it's
I'll be educated here.
really
Educate me.
quick. There's one. I don't know. I feel bad. It's really, really bad. I don't remember one of the characters. I don't know one of the characters I didn't recognize. It might be M from Generation X. I think it's her. It's an
Okay.
African American lady, but I don't recognize her. But I think it's M. I think it's her. I don't know. Again, it's mainly because I haven't read X-Men comics in forever because they've been terrible for so long. But
Hmm.
it's Angel,
Okay.
Havoc,
Hmm.
and then Feral
Okay.
from X
From X
Force.
Force, yeah.
Yeah, and what's the other one? There's one. Oh, I think Pyro.
Pyro. Okay.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that they have a very they are looking like they're from the 90s era, like the Havoc Wolfsbane era. So
Oh yeah.
Feral, I know it's Feral because she's got the lighter like orange kind of colored fur.
Yeah.
She's the one instead of Wolfsbane. I'm like, this is totally indicative of like the 90s version, which I loved. I love
Hmm.
those 90s comics. And so Frenzy, who's is that? I'm not sure who Frenzy is, so tell me who that is. I'm bad about that. But anyway, the new era started to win me over. My only complaint is there's 3 different X-Men teams coming out, which I'm like, what the hell? Like, what did X-Men 97 teach us, Sean? Simple,
Yeah.
simplify.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm done. But the X Factor team lineup is kind of rad. Not gonna lie, I'm kind of into it. So anyway, let's talk about these comic books. You picked
Sure.
out X Factor issues 65 through 68,
Hmm.
which I was glad you did because I have a connection specifically with one issue of this series.
Okay.
Only one issue,
Only one issue.
but I'll save that for later. But
Okay.
you chose this for X-Men 97 reading, and I'm glad you did in retrospect, especially now. Like, I had no idea Cable was going to be a big character in it, to be honest. So
Yeah. Yeah.
why did you, what drew these comics to you originally and all that? Give us the origin story quickly.
So I was getting back into comics in 1991. The issue that really grabbed me was Uncanny X-Men 279. It's the one with Colossus.
Just grab it.
Yep, on the cover, he's about to punch
I know
Professor X.
I know it well.
And that one, I was at a Walden Books at the mall, and I'm looking at the comic rack, and then I'm like, Colossus is back because he's my boy. He's always been my favorite X-Man.
Yeah,
Absolutely, like everything about that character just works for me. So I grabbed that one, and then I went down the rabbit hole, and I honestly don't even remember how I found out about X Factor. It was the Muir Island saga,
Oh yeah,
because
it's the same era, same time frame.
yeah, see, because 69 X Factor 69 and 70 were
Oh, like
part of it.
tie-ins.
It was
Yeah.
the conclusion of it in 70, and then 69 it was another thing, and I was like, I like this. The artwork in this is working for me. So then I went to the comic shop and I started looking, and then all of a sudden I found 68, 67, and I
Oh,
looked
okay.
at those
Back issue.
issues, and I was like, oh my God. Like, I just saw the covers to these, and I'm like, I don't know who's drawing this, but I need this in my life. And I got them as I I couldn't get the whole run of this. I ended up getting like the last two issues, and then eventually, or like, I don't know, it was like I got two out of the four, and then eventually I got the other ones. But long story short, I was blown away by number one, the artwork. Will Spertasio, for me, worked better than Jim Lee in that era. From my
Mm,
sensibilities, at least,
okay.
there's this dynamic vibe that he brings and this freshness that he brings that to this day when I look at these, I'm like, this is peak amazing 90s artwork to me. But then,
So if I may, I just want,
sure,
because I love what you're doing here. I just only interrupt because I want to get digging into deeper of the art and the stories that and the
sure.
and how he what exactly, because I know I don't want to put you on the spot, but I love what you're saying. What exactly does he do as an artist? And Rob, if you're listening, I know Rob's my buddy Rob is on here too. He's an artist. What about him in his layouts that are really bringing out more than Jim Lee? Jim Lee draws pretty. Like, let's be real, he draws pretty beautiful pictures,
Absolutely.
but his storyboard, his layouts are not always the greatest. But I think he's a good. I think he's a good action. Like, he's a good action
Oh yeah.
storyteller.
Yeah.
But what about Wills is different and more dynamic to you than Jim Lee and or anyone in particular in that era? Go ahead.
There, I for me it was just I looked at what he was doing, and like panel like this or a page like this, for instance, where he doesn't worry about having all of it has to be in clean lines, and
Mm,
it really gives you the sense of how all hell is breaking loose around the team. It's frenetic. It's got this energy that Jim Lee might do one panel where it is like this if it's like an extremely dramatic moment. But here, Will Spertassi is just like, everything has to look nuts so that you can feel like you're in the middle of this battle that X Factor's going through. And if
mm.
you look at even like X Factor 69, for instance, I know that's not part of what we're talking about, but there
How
is
dare you?
I should have probably grabbed that one to prove this point, but I didn't know how deep we were going here.
We're
But
good. We're good,
there
man. We're
is a
good.
two-page spread in that one. I think it's within the first couple of pages where it's the entire team. They're all in trench coats and fedoras, and there's a shot that happens in the middle of like a rally, and when you see the team jumping into action, I'm like, this is so much fresher and so much more urgent than half the
Mhm.
stuff that I remember looking at from that era and having that same feeling. Like even this panel, look at Beast's face right there. That eyeball and just his like yelling expression. And then you have Cyclops there with the jagged, crazy, frenetic panel. And it just it works for me on this level of you're communicating so much using two panels of a page,
Love it.
and it just it and you know, it's like when this page in particular I wanted to show, and I'm glad it came up right now actually, because when I looked at how he even drew other Marvel characters, it made me want to see him draw other books than just
Yeah.
X-Men books.
Mhm.
Because like his Thor or his not Thor, but the Thing and Human Torch there, I would have loved to see him draw Fantastic Four in that era.
Oh, damn. Yeah.
It would have been
Dude,
an amazing comic.
Sean, you just broke it down really well, actually. I let you cook and you killed it, man. You cooked the meal because it's this is you just nailed it. I think Will's I think that's the thing. I want to bring up that page. I'm glad you brought this panel here, or maybe it was a page. I forgot which one it was. But
Yeah, that one.
is this a page or a double? Just a
That
double panel?
that was just because of comicsology, that's just like that part that I was reading, so it's a part of a page. But
Okay.
it's amazing how well that little part of that page really grabbed me that way. So
No, and I think that's a great example of what look what's like, you have a wide, more of a wide upward angle of Cyclops, like you said, like just busting out the beams, and it's just super kinetic and just like bleh, and then you go tight up close on Beast's face. It's such a dynamic, just that one part of it. I love that you brought that up. And again, like this is someone who really understands what it's like to look at a comic book, because you could listen, we all need to do stuff like this. If you're drawing comics, you got to draw panels. It can be 4 panels. Yeah. It's like, you can't just do like stuff like that. It'd be too chaotic. Right. But to be able to bring, in order to bring a freshness, like you're saying, you have to be able to do things like that, where you're having, dynamic things like this, and that whole chaotic idea like this right here, to give people a freshness. So where you can do like, this, and yeah, this is still jagged. It's not just a full, listen, I like when people just do the four plane panels of like gutters, whatever lines and everything. But this is, again, because like you said, he's emphasizing how chaotic this book is, because it goes from right to go, because we all know, we're going to do light spoilers. I want people to read these comic books. Again, these are X Factor issues 65 through 68. And the premise is Nathan Summers, they get attacked by none other than, it's pretty obvious what it's, Apocalypse. It's very random too. It's a very like, oh, Apocalypse, here I am, blah, blah. And it's like, oh, okay, all right. We just got through Extinction Agenda, and Professor X is gonna die, but we didn't go for whatever reason. But all right, I know it's like whatever because of comics. But Apocalypse decides to show up, attack, get with a bunch of new mutants. I think there are first appearances. I'm pretty sure.
I want to say and when I was a kid, it drove me nuts because I know there's this one actually tells you who some of them are, but then there's another character that's earlier on where I'm like, I have no idea who that guy's name is.
The Psy guy, the telepath.
No, the red and the black guy.
Yeah, that guy.
And they say his name once in the first issue of this arc, and you never hear it again. And I'm like, how come everybody, you at least get 3 times them mentioned? That guy gets nothing.
Yeah. He was. I wonder if he ever shows up again. We do have Husk, who actually ends up being in the cartoon. I don't think any of these make except for is it Tusk or Husk? I think it's Tusk. Excuse me.
Tusk, I think. Yeah.
Tusk is the only one I think that makes it in the cartoon. He's interesting. Dark Riders. That's where they are. Okay, cool. Thank you, Eric. So like I was pretty sure, I'm like, because I remember as a kid, I'm like, who the hell are these people? I don't even know, I knew who Apocalypse was, but anyway, Apocalypse just shows up and just like raises hell, and it's like, what? And so I had like you, I started reading. I was reading X-Men like pretty much religiously, from Inferno almost on to like this to when I left comics in like the Lobdell Kubert era, like off and on, but like I knew exactly what was going on and collected enough to keep it going. And I remember when the Extinction Agenda came out, I started getting to understand everything about with Inferno as well, but Extinction Agenda, I started realizing, X Factor is what they're doing now. And then all of a sudden I got this, and we get the whole Nathan Summers thing and how Apocalypse is going to fully, Vigo the Carpathian him, and basically take over his body, and they infects him with the legacy virus, which that is a reason why they have to take him in, or again, instead of being really quick, I want to get this out of the way. Instead of being the Anishki, is it Anishki? What's her name? It's like Anishi.
I always thought is it Asani?
Asani, yeah, you're right. Asani.
Asani's son or whatever. That's how I remember it from that one.
I don't remember how to pronounce anything. Anyone who knows me knows I can't pronounce SH. So anyway, instead of having her take Cable, which we get in this story, we get in 97 we have Bishop, which is a lot cleaner. Let's be real. But Nathan, like in the comics or in the cartoon, gets infected with the legacy virus, and but it's it. I mean, that's like that's one reason why we're talking about this, because what's important about these issues is that this is the origin of Cable. Like, this is how Cable became who he is, and it's all in the actual comic book canon. This is where, I mean, Cable's already introduced at this point. We've got, I call him the shoulder pad king, which is, again, I listen. You can rip on Rob Liefeld. I love this image. This is just, God, this is my childhood right there, man. Yeah. But this is how Cable becomes Cable, and this is where the start of it happens. And it's very interesting. This is an important moment in the X-Men continuity, essentially, retrospectively, right now, right?
Yeah, and that's, it didn't even dawn on me how much. Like, I remember going, oh yeah, I remember the legacy virus with Nathan in this, but I didn't, like you said, the more you see of Cable in the show, you're like, oh, this actually this tracks right now. This is important right now for that reason. And one thing that I do like about this over 97, I know you said it's cleaner when Bishop takes him to the future.
Right.
But one thing I love about this, and this is the fatherhood side of it, is Ascani being the one to do it. I love that Cyclops is there like, I literally don't know who you are. I don't know if this is going to help him. And it's the whole, he's literally trusting someone who showed up 15 minutes ago saying, I can save this, I can save your son, we can make him better, and him just kind of going, I'm going to do the Hail Mary into the future and see what happens, versus with Bishop, you just kind of go, yeah, okay, he'll be fine. Like, there is that, yes, you're going to miss him, but he'll be fine. In this one, it's like, I can only imagine how much that is messing with Cyclops from that point on. And again, it's the fatherhood thing. It's like, if I wasn't a dad, I probably wouldn't have had that going into rereading these. And now I'm like, I could not even have fathomed doing that with my child. Even like, they're like, oh, he only has so much to live, and I don't almost let me just be with him for as long as he has.
Why didn't he just go with him?
Well, that's right. Good. I think no, they said why. They said,
that's right. Because if he did that, it would screw up the future. Is that what happened?
No, it was the reason that Ascani could be the one to do it is she is the only one who can transmute herself in order to time travel and survive it because of her atoms and stuff. And then she can go back, but it's like no one else can do this. So she's the only one who's able to do this. And I'm like, that's actually kind of cool too. So it's not like Scott can just go with her, and it's not like Scott can go back and forth to see him. I love that it's a once and done. You have to have faith in this character, and you're done. And man.
Yeah. Eric, really quickly, it's funny you say this, because when I was getting the Fatal Attraction stuff, and I love that Excalibur comic, because Excalibur was a non-mutant book for ages, and they finally started bringing it back into like reality, because Nightcrawler was my favorite characters, and I was like, why the hell is Nightcrawler not a part of the mutants? Hello. Thanks, Chris Claremont. Whatever. That's one of Chris's I think rare mistakes, was taking Nightcrawler into Excalibur. I think that was a waste of time, me personally. I know Alan Davis is a great artist, and people love that run. I wish Shadowcat, Phoenix, and Nightcrawler should have been on the X-Men, me personally. Anyway, but that comic you're talking about is important because because this is you don't know this, Sean, but I don't think you do. In that comic he's talking about, Rachel Summers, the Phoenix, she's in the story there. That Cable shows up and they fight.
Oh, cool.
So it's brother versus sister.
Yeah.
And then she I remember vividly being like, what the hell is she talking about? Because she all of a sudden gets a different costume and goes in a trance and says calls her Anna's my son, whatever. And he's like, what did you call me? And it's like, what the hell is going I'm like, what the hell is going on as a kid? Like, what is this? This is Rachel Summers, for God's sakes. Yeah. They're both for the future. What is going on? But anyway, oh God, X-Men, you gotta love it, man. And this is what's cool is eventually, if you read the comic books, you can go into Yeah. See, exactly. Eric, stop trying to steal my thunder. That's why I have it up here, for God's sakes. But you can read Cyclops and Phoenix right after this comic book. You can read these issues, and there's a cool continuation of like developing of Nathan becoming Cable, as you can see here as young Nathan, with the cybernetic arm becoming Cable, yada yada yada. It's again, this is good stuff. These comics are they're pretty. It's funny. You would think they're a quick read, Sean, but they're not.
No,
like they're dense, man. Part of it is because these are written by Chris Claremont himself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? And I'm pretty sure, because are you an artist for your job? I'm putting you on the spot. I don't mean to, but are you an artist? Do you do that for a living?
Yeah, well, graphic designer. Yeah.
Well, right. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. I say that because you have to be familiar with the Marvel method, then.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
This screams Marvel method to me.
Yeah.
There's no way in hell because I'm a writer, there's no way in hell I'm writing this. I'm like, put Cyclops in a, it's like, there's a plot of hey, here's what's supposed to be, and then like I'll like just do this comic book and I'll put things where they need to go. And like, because there's so much like double word balloons, and I'm like, this is so Marvel method. This is Wills having full am I making explain that to me? You're the artist here. Explain this, why that would be, because this does not make sense to me as a script writer.
No, I just reading this on Comixology, I was bouncing all over the page, and it was driving me crazy, because if I was looking at it like a normal comic, it would probably translate better. But yeah, I mean, I went back and I double checked the credits, and it was Jim Lee and Wills doing the plot and the story. And then Chris Claremont did the script, and yeah, I agree. It is the Marvel method, where it literally is, okay, what do we need to tell on this page? Well, Scott's going to be mad because he's frustrated that they're running out of time, and the others are going to be trying to persuade him that, well, Scott, we got to come up with a plan here. And like this one in particular, this page, it actually impressed me because they gave so much room for all of those balloons down there with Scott. But I did like what he was saying in the balloons too.
No, of course, right.
It actually worked. It worked very well, and it's again, this is completely blowing my mind of how much I'm enjoying Cyclops because of this and X-Men 97 right now. But yeah, there are definitely, it's like the beginning of the Image revolution, the way that these comics are set up. But I will say, I feel like there is more of a emotional core to this than maybe what Image was doing at the time.
Yeah, sure.
You just had, okay, like there were ones that were good. There were ones that really needed, like you just looked at them and you're like, pretty pictures, but yeah, I can understand completely from like you look like that panel to me, the one of Cyclops, that just could have been the whole left side of that.
Yeah,
and given some breath to those word balloons, for instance, instead, because there's so much open space. The negative space down there is making me go, that is set up very top heavy and awkward. Now that I'm looking at it.
Yeah, no, but and for those who don't know, the Marvel method is where the plot is given to the artist, and the artist draws, and then the writer comes back in and writes a dialogue based upon what the artist gives them through their layouts. And to be honest, I feel like I like both, but you could tell, like, as a kid, and it just honestly helped shape and form me. To be honest, as a writer, when I write my scripts now, because like I grew up on the artist era, that it's not just so cut and dry of like, this is a very cut and dry page, but the page of 4 panels here, that's just 4 panels. It's like we get stuff like this where I'm like, oh yeah, we have like really cool dynamics of like, really this crazy thing. Like, art writers do not think like this. And to be honest, I hate to be like, this is an easy way out, but it's 50-50. I feel it has to be like, there has to be an order to it, but at the same time, like, writers should not be in charge of how the layouts should really be in the end. The artist should have full control, in my opinion, because of stuff like this, where what I think is not going to be as nearly as cool as what you would think, Sean, because you're a freaking graphic designer. And your mind works way better at that shit than me. And that not me, not to say I couldn't have a good idea here or there, but you get what I'm saying? Like whatever you guys come up with is going to be way more visually pleasing probably than what I could think in my head. Now it's good to have that structure there. Right, to get, because like you said, when you're reading this on the Comixology, you're like blah, 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 blah. It's all over the place. Like listen, yeah, I like this page for the record, but it's a little junky or janky because like you get like the wide weird upward shot, which I like, but then like you have a weird like kind of shot of like of the X Factor, then a close up of Scott, and then like another wide. It's like what? Yeah. There's no real rhyme or reason to this page. I'm like, but Chris Claremont is such a pro and knows how the medium works so well. He gives it to it. You don't think none the wiser when you're a kid. I just took it as it is. It's just a cool, like, oh, it's a rad close-up shot of Scott, which is cool. Which again, I think you need shit like that, honestly. But as a writer, I'm never gonna write that in here. Like, I'm not that cool. I'm not that vision. I mean, I have some elements, I think. But that's the thing with being the Marvel method. I think it's kind of a dying art, and it probably needs to come back a little bit to rejuvenate the medium. I think a little bit. I'm sure it's still there a little bit, but to me, the more freedom you give an artist, the better they're going to put a better product out. But let's be real too. Artists today, not all artists, a lot of artists are very slow. So the more freedom you give them, they're probably going to take like 8 years to do one page. So. Anyway,
and I mean, for me at least, and granted, you know, it's been a little while for me to be in a comic shop, so I really can't say like as of today, but in the art when it comes to a lot of this stuff for me, it really has gone away from the 90s to the point where it is visual storytelling versus the 90s was like in your face. Boom, like splash pages, and
like this, you know,
the poses were more important half
like
the
this
time.
One?
Yeah, exactly. And there's a payoff at least with that though in the story.
This page is incredible.
Yeah,
this page is nuts.
Yeah.
I listen. I don't mean to interrupt you. I just want to say to people, this is why I love comic books. Like this is. Like you said it best, Wills in this issue, and this is the issue 68. We'll wrap up here. I'll say my piece and we'll get out of here. And after you say you have the final word, but I just want to say that this issue I kept seeing this issue in spinner racks and stuff like that, right? And I've only had this issue of the storyline, only this issue. And I didn't read comics very well when I first got them because I couldn't read. I just had a problem like staying focused. I have bad ADHD, or not bad, but just I have ADHD, and I just couldn't like. But because here's the thing, man, I didn't need words to read comic books.
Yeah,
I had pictures, so I knew exactly for the most part what was happening, and I would just stare at this page forever, and I'd be like, "This is incredible," and. This is to me what I love where the word balloon puts it right in. I think that's beautiful. Like it's perfect. You put it anywhere, it looks weird. It looks perfect in the middle. At least I think so. And like you said, it was earned. It's all built up here, right? And it's earned all at this moment. And it's a fantastic splash page. And like you said, like this is what the image, and this is what the 90s were. It was just all pizzazz. And there's pros and cons to it. This is definitely a pro in my opinion. So Will's like this is always, when I think of X Factor, this is one of the first images in my head. That and Walter Simonson's like a run with like Apocalypse and those like the mutant hunter with the smiley faces with the guns on their heads, like whatever. I love those things a lot too. So anyway, yeah, these issues are fun. I definitely think these are, you know, X Factor 65 through 68. If you're looking to get into like deep dive X-Men 97 stuff, this is definitely worth checking out because you got over a quarter, majority of the characters in the comic book are in the show.
Yeah.
And and it's truly the origin, the true first start of origin of cable. So I'm so glad you picked these out. And yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just want to talk about Splash Page. I had to bring this up before we left. Yeah, give us your final thoughts here.
Final thoughts. I mean, this to me, again, it's my childhood. I was 12 going into 13 years old when these were coming out, and these completely shaped the way that I viewed a lot of stuff. Visually, like I said, Will Spertasu's artwork was knock it out of the park. All of those issues, as far as I'm concerned, and the way he was drawing certain characters was completely mind blowing. I love those costumes, by the way. And it also drives me crazy. I don't get into Marvel Legends figures that often, and I'm trying to like limit my budget. But if they ever came out with the X Factor suits for like this for Scott and Jean, I would probably buy them in a second, because this to me is like my X Factor, and to me the coolest Cyclops get up. I know there's fans of Jim Lee, but yeah, that works for me. But the thing about these two, at least from my standpoint, is I grew up with the second era of X-Men. So I always had Colossus, Wolverine, Nightcrawler, Rogue, Storm, and Shadowcat and stuff. And I always viewed the original X-Men as boring. I always saw them as just blah, because I was like, what did they do that was more interesting than the Mutant Massacre or Inferno and things like that?
Hell yeah.
And
dude, Sean, I recommended Massacre a couple weeks ago. You probably haven't watched the episode, but if you watch the episode, I recommended people for 97 recommendations, Mutant Massacre, baby.
Yeah. It's a good one. That was one of my very first X-Men comic books. It was the one that's a go ahead, make our day, and like Nightcrawler looks beat to shit. And Colossus is there looking all like, I'm ready to punch you right in the head, and Wolverine with his claw. And that was like, my mom's like, this looks so violent. I go, I need this in my life. You're not letting me go home without this today. And from that point on, I was reading X-Men. I loved it. But these comics, these 4 comics, and the ones after with the Muir Island, I'm just sitting there going, holy crap! They re-envisioned these 5 essential X-Men in a way that I'm literally like, I would rather look at this than even the Jim Lee stuff at points. Blew my mind. I had no idea Will Spertasu was even a guy doing comics until these. And then Uncanny X-Men 281, when that one hit and I saw Colossus on the cover, I almost wept, because I'm like, I thought it was only going to be the blue team for the X-Men at that point. And then all of a sudden there's also a gold. This is amazing.
Dude, those issues, talk about kinetic, dude. Those issues were nuts. You know, I mean, oh God, those issues were crazy. Well, this was, again, Sean, thanks for coming on, man, and talking about this. And I knew we were gonna have a blast. This was dude, when you started cooking on those layouts and Wills, I was like, oh man, this is what the binge exists for, baby. This is exactly this is why I knew you're my homie. I knew you're kindred spirit. I thank you so much for coming on. I know it's late over there. We'll get out of here. But obviously, even besides Birthright, I'm gonna get you on earlier time, I promise. But yeah, like this is I'm glad you brought this up. And just my final thing for X Factor, I like these costumes, but I'm partial to the ones before these, where it was like the Cyclops has the white and he has like the and the Marvel Girl, like the Inferno era. The Inferno era. That's my, like, the Simonsons. I love those. Oh God, give me those costumes all day. So I know you've taken a break on your stuff. Is there anything else you wanted to promote on the show? Anything like that?
Sadly, I don't have much to promote right now. I'm just kind of keeping to myself at the moment, not for any negative reasons, but just doing the family thing for a while and enjoying my kids and geeking out with them and getting them into stuff like this. So there you go.
Well, I mean, I think what you need to do is sit your kids down and start from scratch, meaning go from the very beginning of X-Men animated series and just go for it, because I never finished the series before I started. I wanted to finish the series before I started 97, and I rewatched like amazingly, I thought I had way more than left. I actually didn't have as much as I thought. I had watched a lot already, so I was like, oh, that's good. It actually holds up pretty well, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. So I think you guys start from the very beginning with your family and go through it. Make them earn 97, because honestly, it transitions pretty well. You don't need to watch the show, I think, before. People have said that before. I think they're right, but it holds up well. I mean, it's a kids show, so they're not, Wolverine ain't gonna be doing what he did today. I was gonna say that.
Yeah.
But it's still pretty fun. So yeah, man. For those out there, if you guys are wondering, you guys can read these comics on Marvel Unlimited. It's pretty easy. Comixology, which I don't have those anymore, but Hoopla is also on there. I'm pretty sure it's on Hoopla too. I could be wrong, but yeah, go sign up for Marvel Unlimited, people. It's easy. It's free, or not free. It's pretty expensive in my opinion. And please subscribe, all that jazz. Really appreciate everyone who already has. If you made it this long, you're a baller. Sean, thanks so much for coming on. I appreciate it. You're awesome.
Thanks for having me.
We'll have you on again soon. We'll figure it out. But until then, next week, Mad Max Fury Road and its comic book connections. What that is, we'll have to come back and find out. So Chris isn't here, but I'll say it for him.